I don't know why I had the smart idea of rewatching the Kissing Booth movies. Maybe I thought that I would see them in a different light now that I'm older. And yeah, but also not really. I thought back then that they were bad movies, and now I think they're bad movies. But now I can really see why. Yes, like many will point out, there are toxic characters, toxic relationships, and the story overall is dumb. Today, however, I wanted to more specifically look into how the main characters are portrayed in this movie and how they contributed to a bad story. The main characters are Elle, her best friend Lee, and his older brother Noah. The big thing about the movies is that they didn't make us care for any of these characters, and in one way or another, they all suck. So let's explore the bad choices the movie made regarding these characters, starting with Elle. The first mistake the movie made in regard to Elle's character is introducing her through a montage. This sequence also opens the film, and starting with a montage was a poor choice because it doesn't tell us anything meaningful about Elle as a character. Let's first look at what a montage is. A montage is a sequence of shorter scenes edited together, usually tied by music. It allows filmmakers to compress a large amount of information into a shorter period of time. In typical romances, we don't need to see every moment of a relationship. The important parts are usually the beginning, either the meet cute or how the couple gets together, key moments like the first kiss or first date, the conflicts, and the ending. If the film wants to show the relationship developing because it's important, it might use a montage to save time and avoid dragging by showing every single date. This is well demonstrated in La La Land. In La La Land, the montage shows the developing relationship between the two main characters, Sebastian and Mia. It would take too much time and feel repetitive to show every date in full, so the film condenses them into a sequence that still conveys the idea of them growing closer. This type of montage is also used later in The Kissing Booth after Elle and Noah get together. It shows them going on dates, and like the montage in La La Land, it highlights the progression of their relationship. It quickly establishes that their connection is real, and in this case, the montage is used well because it conveys that idea effectively. Now going back to the first montage, using it to introduce a main character is not a good choice because it shows us nothing about who she really is. It tells us who she is, but it doesn't show us. And introducing a character this way feels more like an info dump, and as a result, there's no real emotional attachment. There were important moments in that montage that should have been given full scenes, but instead were cut short and squeezed in. Specifically, I'm talking about Elle's moments with her mom. The montage briefly shows her mom getting sick, being hospitalized, and eventually passing away. Because this is all condensed into about 30 seconds, it doesn't give us enough time to feel anything. We don't get the chance to sympathize with Elle or share in her emotions. And more importantly, we can't fully understand the significance of her relationship with her mom. Seeing how her mom's death affected her would have made us care more about Elle as a character. To jump ahead a bit, in the third movie, Elle gets upset about her dad's new girlfriend because she doesn't want anyone replacing her mom. Instead of sympathizing with her, her reaction feels strange and overblown because it comes out of nowhere.
I don't really care what you want.
That disconnect exists because the film barely acknowledges her mom outside of that brief montage, and we are never really shown how that loss impacted her. Furthermore, the montage not only skips over relationships that should have been developed, it also works against the character by including unnecessary information that just ends up wasting time in the movie. I understand that the purpose of the montage was to show a fun overview about who Elle is and to show us the deep friendship between her and Lee. But recounting all the Halloween costumes they wore over the years is unnecessary. Within the first minutes, we already understand that Elle and Lee are inseparable best friends. If the film really wanted to show us the depth of their bond, it really should have given us more meaningful scenes, like Lee being there for her when her mom passed away. Moments like these reveal far more things about their friendship than Halloween costumes, which don't add anything to the story. Another detail that doesn't connect to the rest of the film is the mention that Elle is good at soccer. It's brought up in a montage and then never referenced again. Jumping ahead to the third movie, Elle suddenly realizes her passion is video games and decides to pursue that, which also feels out of nowhere. If anything, the montage would have been a better place to plant that interest early on instead of introducing soccer, which ends up being irrelevant. And while something like Dance Dance Revolution technically counts as a video game, that's clearly not what her later interest is based on, especially when she talks about esports in her college interview.
What if we were to apply that to a large esports platform?
To show what a strong rom-com opening looks like, let's consider To All the Boys I Loved Before. The main character, Laura Jean, is first seen walking through a field while narrating a dramatic romance about an affair. Then she's hit with a pillow, and we realize she's actually in her room, reading a romance novel with that exact plot. It's an effective introduction to both her character and the tone of the movie. Within 45 seconds, we understand that Laura Jean lives in her imagination and romanticizes love. It also subtly introduces her internal conflict, that she embraces romance in her books but is hesitant to pursue it in real life. Nothing in the opening is wasted. Everything has a purpose, unlike the opening montage in The Kissing Booth. The montage fails to properly introduce Elle. Instead of giving us meaningful insight, it either rushes through important moments or focuses on details that don't matter. As a result, we go into this movie without a strong connection to her, which makes it harder to care about her story moving forward. And we continue not caring because her character arc is essentially non-existent. The point of a story and of a main character is that the character goes on some kind of internal journey to meaningfully change in some way from the beginning of the film to the end of the film. If there's no change from point A to point B, then what's the point of the story? In the first movie, Elle gets into a relationship with Noah, but she hides it because Lee can't find out. The reason? Because being with Noah breaks one of their friendship rules. What are those friendship rules, you might ask? They're a list Elle and Lee came up with when they were 6 years old, a set of guidelines they supposedly have to follow. Some of them are standard, like rule number 18, always be happy for your bestie's successes. But others are more out there, like the rule that relatives are completely off limits, the very reason Elle can't be with Noah. On its own, the rule could make sense, but the movie fails to present these rules as something genuinely important. It never convincingly shows us why they matter or why they have to be strictly followed. The central conflict of the first movie is that Elle breaks this rule, and in doing so betrays Lee's trust. But the film never convinces us that this rule is significant enough or that breaking it is truly a big deal to Lee. Instead, the explanation we get for the rule is shallow. Lee put that rule there because apparently he's living under the shadow of a high school legend. We do see that Noah and Lee have a strained relationship, but most of that tension seems to be coming from Lee. And as the story unfolds, Noah isn't really portrayed as a bad person, which makes Lee's hostility feel more like a misjudgment than something justified.
Telling other guys to stay away from Elle to protect her, and there you are treating her like some slut that you picked up at the club.
On top of that, again, these rules were created when they were 6. That alone makes it harder to take them seriously as something that should dictate their lives years later. So instead of feeling the weight of Elle breaking an important boundary, the whole situation comes across as trivial. And as the rule is the foundation of the central conflict, the movie ends up feeling just as shallow. Anyways, going off the rant about these friendship rules and back to Elle's character arc, she essentially learns in the first movie that Lee can't dictate who she loves.
But being my best friend doesn't give you the right to tell me who I can love.
Basically, she learns that the friendship rules can't dictate how she lives her life. It's not a particularly hard-hitting lesson, but that's her takeaway. And technically, she also learns not to lie to Lee. Let's remember those two things. In the second movie, Noah goes off to college and becomes close friends with someone named Chloe, which makes Elle jealous and insecure. Even after Noah reassures her that nothing is going on, Elle finds Chloe's earring under his bed and immediately assumes he cheated. Back home, Elle grows close to a guy named Marco, and they enter a dance competition together. Still convinced that Noah cheated, she ends up kissing Marco during the competition. Unbeknownst to her, Noah is actually in the audience, having come a day early to support her. However, in the end, everything gets resolved between them and they make up. Through this, she learns to communicate and actually listen.
I just want to tell you, make sure that you really listen to what the other person has to say.
Again, not a gravity punching lesson, but fine. So to summarize, in the first two movies, she learns that the friendship rules don't control her life, that she shouldn't lie, and that she should communicate and actually listen to people. Then the third movie comes along, and everything is thrown out the window. In the third movie, Elle has to decide where to go to college. She gets accepted into both Harvard and UC Berkeley. And the decision becomes difficult because each choice ties to a different person. If she chooses Harvard, she'll be with Noah but break friendship rule number 19. Always go to the same school as your best friend. If she chooses Berkeley, she'll stay with Lee but have to do long distance with Noah. Instead of facing the situation honestly, she ends up lying to both of them and says she got waitlisted at both schools. At the same time, her relationship with Noah is already strained because of Marco, the guy she kissed who reappears and becomes close to her again. On top of that, her dad has a new girlfriend, and Elle reacts negatively, assuming this woman is trying to replace her mom, even though there's no real indication that she is. So the lessons that Elle supposedly learned about not letting the rules control her life, about communicating honestly, and about not lying are all magically forgotten. She ends up relearning the same things all over again. Because of this, she remains a static character across all three movies, making her uninteresting. It also makes her conflicts harder to take seriously because they come across as repetitive or avoidable. Before I start ranting even more, let's shift the focus to the next character that sucks, and one who doesn't work nearly as well as the movie wants them to. I don't care about Elle, and the movie hasn't given me a reason to. But the character that the movie guarantees that no one will care about is Lee. He is essentially framed as the villain of the entire franchise. He's the one driving most of the central conflict, and he comes across as neither a good friend nor a good boyfriend. His approach to his friendship with Elle is pretty toxic. After Noah kisses Elle at the kissing booth, Elle goes to Lee to tell him what happened, and his response is,
Just don't end up grinding coochies with my brother, or I'll literally never talk to you again.
And then at the end of the movie, when Elle tells Lee that he can't dictate who she loves, she asks him how he would feel if she didn't approve of his current girlfriend, Rachel, and this is his response.
It's like with Rachel. What if I didn't like having her around? What would you do then?
I guess I'd break up with her.
What a mature and classy response. I hate him already. And he doesn't get any better in the second movie. Elle starts spending a lot of time with Lee and Rachel, which understandably upsets Rachel. While hanging out with Elle, Lee forgets a movie date with Rachel and leaves her hanging. That alone could be brushed off as a mistake anyone can make, but it's his response afterward that's kinda bad.
She's lonely. I can't just tell her that we don't want her hanging out with us.
But you can leave me standing at the movie theater for 45 minutes just fine?
Yes, Rachel, go off. After this, Lee promises Rachel that he'll talk to Elle about her not hanging around them as much, but he never actually does, and as a result, Elle keeps spending time with them, completely unaware of the situation. If you can't tell your best friend that you want to spend alone time with your girlfriend, it clearly shows which relationship you prioritize, which is fine, but Lee shouldn't be stringing Rachel along if he can't give her what she wants. Instead, he just continues to disappoint. At one point, Rachel, Lee, and Elle plan to dress up as s'mores for Halloween, but Elle decides she wants to do something else. Lee forgets to tell Rachel, so when the party comes around, Elle and Lee show up as matching Ghostbusters, while Rachel arrives as the marshmallow. Rachel initially gets upset with Elle, thinking everything is her fault, but when she realizes that Lee never told Elle anything, she kinda breaks things off with him, and when Lee and Elle talk about what happened, Lee explains to her why he couldn't bring himself to tell her about Rachel's request.
I guess the real reason I didn't tell you is because I didn't want to. just always want you around.
If that's what he wants, he should be with someone who's okay with that. But since Rachel clearly isn't, they're just not compatible. And also, he comes across as very clingy in the scene, and it's obvious who the most important person in his life is. Although, apparently, it's not that obvious to him, because when he tries to win Rachel back, he tells her that she's the most important person to him in his life.
I am so sorry for ever making you feel like anything less than the most important person in my life.
Basically, the way I see it, he lies to Rachel to get her back. It's pretty clear that Elle is his priority, and he hasn't shown through actions or words that that isn't the case. Unfortunately, Rachel forgives him and they get back together. At this point, you might think that he learned how to balance his friendship and his relationship, or at least developed a healthier dynamic with Elle. After all, he chose Rachel, so that should imply some kind of growth, right? No, because then the third movie comes along. Elle forgets a prior engagement with Lee because Noah just broke up with her, and after explaining that she was with Noah, this is his response.
I know you're upset, but this
And I don't matter to you, really. Not compared to him. I never have.
And then Elle goes off on him, pointing out that everything she's done has proven that Lee is just as important to her as Noah. And honestly, that's true. She has shown that. Meanwhile, Lee has learned nothing. He still has an unhealthy view of his friendship with Elle and remains the exact same person as he was at the beginning of the first movie. So in conclusion, I hate Lee. The best thing that has happened in these movies is Rachel breaking up with Lee. But of course, the epilogue reveals that they get back together anyway. Now let's move on to Noah because I'm done talking about Lee. In the first movie, Noah is supposed to be the bad guy, someone Elle shouldn't be with, so that Lee's disapproval, Lee's rule, and her dad's concerns carry weight. But the movie never really commits to that idea, and like I mentioned earlier, it doesn't really convincingly portray him that way. For example, he's supposed to be a womanizer, but the movie doesn't really show us that. We see him make out with one girl at a party, and then we are told by Elle,
I cannot just be another one of your conquests.
telling us something isn't the same thing as convincing us of it. If we don't actually see it, it doesn't matter how many characters say it, it just doesn't carry any weight. If the movie wants us to believe that Noah is bad news because he's a player, then they should introduce him that way and show that behavior clearly. There's a show called Max and Hall where the main guy is introduced as this rich player type, and within seconds, we understand exactly who he is. It works because the show shows us his personality through his actions instead of relying on characters to explain it. That's the difference. The audience is convinced almost immediately. Here, that doesn't happen. We're told that Noah has this reputation, but the movie never backs it up in a convincing way, so the label ends up feeling empty. Another thing Noah is supposed to be is violent. The movie does try to show that more, but again, it doesn't convince me that he's a violent person. The first major fight we see is when he punches Tubman, but Noah only does that because Tubman is about to hit Lee, his younger brother, and had also been sexually harassing Elle. In that situation, his reaction feels more protective than aggressive. The second fight is with Warren, who is trying to pressure Elle into doing something she doesn't want to do, and then also insults her.
I guess I'd also be pretty pissed if I was slumming it with my little brother's sloppy seconds.
I know fighting isn't the answer, but if the goal was to present him as this toxic bad guy that Elle shouldn't be with, the movie goes about it the wrong way. You can't frame him as dangerous and violent when you only show him fighting people who actually kinda deserve it. All that does is make him look protective and well-intentioned, not someone we should be wary of. Instead of reinforcing the idea that he's bad for her, those scenes end up doing the opposite. They make him seem like a good guy, which completely undercuts the conflict the movie is trying to build around him. And this good guy image is reinforced throughout this movie. When Lee finds out about Elle and Noah accidentally, he gets really angry and starts a fight with Noah. Noah, however, doesn't fight back and instead tries to calm him. In addition to that, after he kisses Elle for the first time, his focus has only been on Elle. In the second movie, while their communication both ways could have been better, Elle ends up being the one that cheated, and he still got back together with her. In the third movie, he's the one making it up to Elle every time. First, by organizing a romantic dinner for both of them, and second, by visiting her after one of her shifts at work. I said earlier that the best thing to happen was Rachel breaking up with Lee, while the second best thing was Noah breaking up with Elle. But unfortunately, the epilogue also alludes to the fact that they got back together. Well, at the end, Noah doesn't actually suck, but him not being portrayed the way they intended definitely contributes to it being a really bad movie. There are many reasons why these movies were really bad, and one of those reasons was definitely these characters. A good story makes us care about its main characters because then we are invested to see how it continues. But if you give us characters like these, no one will care or feel emotionally connected to what happens to them. Let me know your opinions of The Kissing Booth. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.